Monica, who will introduce our guest. During this time, if you have any questions, just hit me up in the Google chats and I will ask the questions for you. So without further ado, Monica.
Hi, thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So this is the first time we use Google Meets. Bear with us, please.
Yes.
Um, Give me a second. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Question here for the guest speakers.
Well,
yes.
Not that
Yes.
the actual assignment that we have. Usually, when like listening to the speaker, we have to
Yeah, it's in Google Classroom.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, can I start? Hello, Melissa?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm getting a message from my other colleagues. They can't log in to the link that you sent.
So
Sorry.
can you, we're live, so can you go ahead and do the presentation and then have them email me?
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Monica Rosas. Thank you for having us. This presentation will be on careers in information communication technologies and digital media sector, but specifically for cybersecurity. So I'm just going to give you guys an overview of today's presentation. Um, So I'm going to give you guys a little intro and who I work for, the organization that I work for. I work for the San Diego and Imperial Community Colleges Regional Consortium, and I'll explain more about it in a second. We have two presenters. We're very lucky to have two presenters who are experts in the topic of cybersecurity. Ms. Lynn Ihar Hoffman, she will present on cybersecurity paths and certifications. And then Gabriel Reyes, IT security analyst, will speak of the importance of small businesses and cybersecurity. And after that, we can have about 5 to 7 minutes of questions and answers. So if you could write down your questions, send them in the chat to Ms. Melissa, and then we'll address them at the end. So I work for the career education program at the San Diego and Imperial Counties Community Colleges. Usually when we do these in person, we always poll the students and ask them, oh, how many community colleges do you think there are in the region? We always get like, oh, we think there's 3, we think there's 5, but there's actually 10. So we have 9 in San Diego and 1 in Imperial Valley, which is Imperial Valley College. And I pretty much work to support all of the career education programs in these 7 community colleges. We promote, or at least I promote and support 6 priority sectors. One of them is ICT, Information Communication Technology, and in it, cybersecurity. So just a little bit about cybersecurity in San Diego. A lot of the direct jobs, there's about 8,000 direct jobs, and this is statistics that you could find in the 2019 report for the Cyber Center of Excellence. A lot of the companies or the firms in San Diego, their reach is really global because they are international companies. So for instance, Civic or DJO or those type of companies, they have facilities all over the world. So their cybersecurity team their reach is really global. And then this is just more information about the economic impact it has to the region, and then how many jobs are in cybersecurity in San Diego available still. Then again, there's a variety of industries that need or have the need or have created new departments in cybersecurity for their companies. There's manufacturing, even hospitals, because, and I think Lynn in her presentation, I don't want to say too much, she touches a little bit on, like, for instance, when you go to a doctor, the information you give, it's in the computer, so there definitely has to be some security around that. So these are just a couple of the different industries of security firms that operate in San Diego. And then the growing talent pool in the region. These are just some examples of the different occupations within cyber and some of the top certifications. And again, Lynn will touch on these a little bit more. These are just some examples. If you guys are interested in this sector, I would encourage you to go into the website of the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence. They actually have a mapping tool where you could kind of map your journey, your education path, and it looks a little bit like the screen that I'm sharing right now. And they have a lot of information, a lot of statistics, a lot of everything around cybersecurity related information and data. So I would encourage you guys to just browse around that website if you guys are really interested in this sector or in pursuing a career in cybersecurity. And this is just an example of the type of programs at the community colleges for cyber. When I did this presentation like a year ago, we only had programs that I could find at Cuyamaca College in Miracosta. Now, because the sectors or the cybersecurity is growing so much and there's a need, especially now, right now that we're all working from home. Everyone's connected some way. So now the community colleges are offering more programs. And this is just an example of the type of classes that you would take at the community college if you're interested in pursuing a career in cybersecurity. And I just wanted to give you a real example of the type of jobs that are out there. I did this search 2 days ago on Indeed, and General Atomics, for instance, is right now looking for a response analyst. And this is just some of the duties and responsibilities that this person has to comply with, and then some of their job qualifications. And I highlighted some of the certifications because some of these are in Lynn's presentation that you will hear in a couple of minutes. So that's my part. Now let me share Lynn's presentation. Give me 1 second. And we can share these slides with your teachers. So if you guys want to see more, can you see your presentation now, Lynn?
I do.
Okay, so now Lynn Ihad Hoffman is going to present.
Hello, good morning, everybody. You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Good morning. Very excited to be able to talk to all of you about cybersecurity. I will just let's go to the next slide, please.
Sorry.
That's okay. There we go. Just a quick background, and this is also to show you that you know, the sky's the limit, and it goes kind of like with the paths. I started my career in international business, and that is actually how I met Monica and Gabriel, who will present later. We were all in the international business field, and you know, Gabriel and I transitioned into cybersecurity, which goes to show you that even if you study one career, you can always make a shift later. But we'll get into that further down the presentation. While in international business, I created an online platform for exporters and importers to be able to do their research online and know maybe what products would be best to export to, you know, certain countries. At that point, I got hacked. Somebody got into my system and took over my website, which was my main, I guess you would call it, storefront. And you can imagine how much panic I had to begin with, and the potential of that, how much it could hurt a business. In my case, I was lucky, was able to, with some help, bring it back up. But many companies are not as lucky, or their attacks become much, much larger and much more dangerous, and you know, that can affect more of a company and employees. So that's kind of how I started my interest in cybersecurity. Went back to school and did a master's in cybersecurity. Got my certification. We'll talk about that later, so I can tell you the importance of those. And And so now I am, we can go to the next slide. Now I own a consulting company, where I do risk assessments for cybersecurity and awareness trainings for the most part. And we'll talk a little bit about what those are on the presentation, what that means. I am also a cybersecurity course developer and adjunct faculty at the University of San Diego. So I get to do that as well. So let's begin. I will go with the next slide, please. Cybercrime is a global problem that's been dominating the news cycle for a long time now. As you know, it poses a threat to individual security and even bigger threat to large companies, international, local, all sizes, banks, and even governments. It's the hope that most companies have preventative security software installed in their systems to stop these types of attacks. But no matter how secure we are, cybercrime is going to happen at one time or another, or unfortunately multiple times. So we want to be protected. This is where cybersecurity pretty much comes into to save the day. And so let's begin now by looking at what it's called the cybersecurity framework. Okay, and I'll just going to give you an overview so you have a very good understanding of cybersecurity, because one thing about cybersecurity is that you cannot perform one of the multiple jobs in this field if you don't understand how it all works, if you don't understand what all the people involved in cybersecurity do and what the rules are. You're not going to be able to protect very well unless you understand all that. So we'll go really quickly to give you a good understanding of that. So let's begin by looking. That's good. Let's begin by looking at the 5 main functions of cybersecurity. And basically, what's the process of protecting this data? Okay, so when you look at these 5 functions, you can get an idea of what you're supposed to, what are the main activities in cybersecurity to protect data. So if you look in the very far left, you first want to identify, you want to understand what you're going to protect, and what's worth protecting and what it's not. There's some things that are really not even worth the time, but anyway, so that's the part where you decide all that. For example, assets that you may want to protect include important data, like what Monica said earlier. For example, hospitals need to protect patients' health information. You really wouldn't want your health information falling in the wrong hands. That would not be very good. For example, credit card companies need to protect your financial information, banks. So you can kind of get the idea of pretty much when you think of a company, what kind of information they need to protect. Well, cybersecurity also protects physical devices, your systems, from laptops, servers, smartphones, tablets, all kind of equipment, to ultimately the safety of everybody, of you and me. Including, I guess, some companies, employees, stakeholders, so all around. So cybersecurity is not only about the computer and the data; it's the protection for everybody. So I'll go quickly down the line. The next one would be protect, and it's like the title mentions. It's where you're going to come up with methods to protect the assets that we just talked about. The detect function defines the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event, like a breach or attack. So it enables their timely discovery. You want to make sure you know where an attack is coming from, and you need to be detecting, pretty much checking, monitoring all the time to detect these. Then, of course, you want to respond adequately, but you in advance. This is the stage where you see like the vulnerabilities, where you can get attacked, and you plan how you're going to respond in case one of these attacks happens. Okay, and then recover, the last stage. Well, you need to get back to business and to normal operations. So what is that going to look like? You need to plan that in advance as well. So when an attack or a breach happens, you have your plan ready, and you go through some of these steps to get it back online, if you will. So that's the idea of the activities of cybersecurity. Now I'm going to go talk quickly about 8 identified domains, and these are broken up into 8 groups that they kind of fit into these 5 stages that I talked to you about. But I want to tell you about these domains because while we go through them, you will be able to see all the different types of jobs and activities that you can do. And then after that, we'll look at a list of very long jobs involved in cybersecurity that might interest you, because I think anybody could participate in a career in cybersecurity. So let me see. Let me just close this thing right here. Okay, so let's begin with our first asset security. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this section is going to focus on, again, what are your assets? What do they look like? Who owns them? Who are you protecting? If you're going to keep the information, if a hospital, for example, how long do they need to keep your records? A bank, how long do they need to keep your records? So this is the part that would involve, if you were interested in this part, in a job, this is the part where you would look at rules, regulations out there in the world and try to apply them to make sure that your company is complying with, again, how long to keep records, how to dispose of them, what are assets, and all of that. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, then we have security and risk management, that part that where you, again, go back, look at, okay, what could be the risks that could attack this data? How are we going to adapt to protect this data? This is the part that, for example, if you like to write a lot, this is the area where, for example, you could work for a company that creates policies and procedures. So, for example, one would be a mobile policy. And when new employees start working in a company, you give them this report, pretty much, policy that you wrote, explaining how they're supposed to use their mobile phone, what apps, in relation to the company, what apps they're allowed to have on their phones, just, and it ranges from having mobile operations to how to use a computer, how to log off, how to log on, just everything that would cover to make sure that somebody is really being careful with their security when they're dealing with their devices or information, client information. So this would be, or again, if you like to so if you're someone that is always looking at the risks, this would be an area where you would be more involved and that you would do very good. Next slide, please. Security operations. This is actually very, if you are interested in like the FBI actually hires a lot of people that work in this area, which is they support investigations. In fact, if you work for a company, at some point you might have the role of, if there's a security breach, the FBI will come talk to you and you will be able to show them all the logs where people logged in the systems and where they logged off, and people that came in and out, who has security cards to access the system, so on and so forth. But this is the part, again, where you would need to assist, I suppose, FBI and police when they're trying to find out what happened in the crime committed, so against your company. Next slide, please. Identity and access management. This is the plan, like people that plan, well, how are you going to protect your information, your service and your devices physically in a company, for example. This these types of jobs would involve people thinking, okay, well, if we live in an area where there's a lot of tornadoes, okay, well, where are we going to place our server room? Because we want to make sure that that's going to be protected, that it's not going to be next to a window that if a tornado comes in and breaks the window, that it's going to destroy our servers, right? So also, who's going to access the servers? Who has the key at night when everybody goes home? Who keeps that key, the server room key? Who has access to that? Well, you probably don't want everybody having access to that, because you might get a bad employee that decides to go in the middle of the night and destroy your server or do something or collect information from it. So this is that part where you have to think about all those, I would say, physical protections that you have to have in place. So next slide, please. And this is the engineering, where you have to think about, okay, well, how much security do we need, for example, when somebody logs in? For example, I don't know if you've heard lately, the Zoom application that a lot of us have been using, they've had to work harder on adding more security to it in some way, hardening their cryptography algorithms. And I don't know if you've heard of cryptography. It's the idea of when you put in a password into a system, when you are creating an account, that password goes through what it's called an algorithm, a function that scrambles everything, and that scramble all letters, that's called the cryptography. So you're trying to mask it, if you will, so that nobody else can access that information. Okay, so this is the part that that looks into that. So if you like mathematics, if you like numbers, and you're you like to solve puzzles, this would be probably an area that would interest you and excite you, and that you would do well in. So that would be one of the functions of or one of the jobs that would fall into this category. Next slide, please. This is a similar one in some way, but it deals a little bit more with the physical devices, the servers, the connections of all the computers. Let's say you're working at a company doing IT connections. You have to make sure that all your connections are working securely, your firewalls are in place, and that you have systems in place to see who could be attacking, where it's coming from. So this is that part of cybersecurity that, again, if you're into the networks and all that, this would be the part where you would probably find a job in. Next slide, please. This is a part, okay. This is security and assessment testing. A lot of it here is going to be, I don't know if you've heard of, I think we have a little crow around there.
Oh, you know what? Let me just do something. I'm sorry, really fast. This is the first time we use Meet. So let me see if I could just mute myself, because I think I'm the one with the echo.
Oh, it sounds
Sorry,
like a
guys.
little crow.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So this is the part where you would, I don't know, penetration testing, where you go in and almost, if you're a white hat hacker and you have good intentions, this is the part where you can go in and attack your systems on purpose, almost to make sure that you have all the protections in place. And if at some point a bad actor, a bad guy comes in and tries to attack you, you already kind of played that scenario out beforehand, and you know exactly, you put everything in place to make sure that attack is limited, or that it doesn't happen at all. This is also the area, I'm sure you've heard of auditors for the IRS. Well, in some way, this is kind of the same thing. Cybersecurity has auditors that they go into companies to check that their security is indeed in place and in the right way. There's a lot of frameworks out there that guides, if you will, that help companies put their security plans together, and that auditors come in and check that that is all in line and that they're following the rules, and that they're protecting the customers' information. So, and last of the 8 is software development security. So this area is, if you're a programmer, I don't know if you've heard of this, a lot of programmers, very talented people, they like to make their programs, but they're not very much aware on how to implement security into their programs. Do keep in mind that sometimes when you add security, it's going to reduce your functionality. Your game might not be exactly as you want it, because you're going to have some limitations when you add security. So, but it's needed. It's needed because if it's not done from the beginning and it's just patched later, you're going to have many problems. So the cybersecurity community encourages programmers to add security functions from the beginning, from when they're planning to program or create a game, or so on and so forth. So those are the 8 domains where, again, all the jobs that now we're going to talk about fit into in one way or another. And Monica, next slide, please. And we have a list of a lot of them, but I'm just going to go through some of them so you, again, get the idea of what you can do in this area. Okay, so for example, the first one, application security administrator. They keep the software application safe and secure. And we have artificial intelligence security specialist. They use artificial intelligence to combat cybercrime. That actually sounds like a lot of fun if you are if you're very creative. If you even like cars, automotive security engineer. So you protect cars from cyber intrusions. You know how now all these cars have all these computers and all that technology? Well, they can be hacked too, to the point where somebody can take control of your car and drive it for you remotely. And you don't want that to happen when you are driving the car. So, there's a job for you in that if you're into cars. Blockchain developer or engineer. Code the future of secure transactions. I'm sure you've heard of blockchain and how they try to make sure that nobody accesses your information when you're sending information from your computer to the bank or vice versa. Bug bounty hunter. I wouldn't recommend this, but I am sure that that I know these people get paid quite a bit, but pretty much they're hackers that get paid to attack a company. Maybe just the CEO will know about it, and none of the employees. They go in and try to hack the company again, kind of like what I was explaining earlier, to see if the company is protected or not. I'll go a little faster. I think I'm going over my time, right, or close to it. Okay, I think I'm in complete silence, but sorry, I'll just keep moving a little bit faster. Just really quickly from the previous slide, Chief Information Officer, CISO, that's a title you're going to hear about. That's like the main guy of cybersecurity in a company. Yeah, this slide is good. You're going to have previous slide, the slide before. Thank you. I'll be quick. I promise. We have cryptographers. Develop systems to encrypt sensitive information, kind of like we were talking about right before. We have cyber intelligence specialists, analyzes cyber threats and defense against them. Cybercrime investigator solves crimes conducted in cyberspace. Again, if you want to work for the FBI and be a special agent, this might be a role that you would play, or you would a job that you could apply to. You have cybersecurity lawyers. So if you like the law and you want to go down that path, you can be in the law field and also cybersecurity. Okay. Software developer. Next slide, please. Data privacy officer, they make sure that, again, a company is complying to security and to protect their customers' data. Digital forensics analysts, they are the ones that go into computers. For example, if a crime happens and they figure that maybe the computers, their cell phones can give them a clue about what happened in the crime, that would be something, a job that does that focuses on that. Let me see. We'll keep going. I think we have 2 more slides in this category. We'll go with the next one, please. Thank you. We have Internet of Things security specialist, which protects all the network, the connected devices, make sure that some of them are not leaking information to others that they're not supposed to. And so, you make sure that all that is all those communication waves are protected between the Internet of Things. Mobile security engineers, if you really like mobile phones and the technology, that would be probably a role you could do. Again, let's go to the next one. There we go. And this is the last one. But I'm sure that, I don't know if your teacher can provide you with the slides, and maybe, or these last ones, you can kind of go through the list again and look at all the opportunities. Security awareness training specialist. So if you like to teach, this would be an area. I do some of that as well. That's a lot of fun. You go into companies and you pretty much tell the employees, this is how what you need to do to protect yourself and your company from a cyber attack or whatnot. Security operations center manager, if you like to oversee people, and this could be an area where you can make sure all the security operations center is running smoothly. Virus technician, vulnerability assessor, the sky's the limit. So anyway, those are good examples of titles of jobs you can do. And again, it's not just 50, there's probably a lot more out there. Now we're just going to jump into the certifications. We're going to talk about those very quickly. Considering a career in cybersecurity, I will say it is recommended that you have an IT background, at least that you like computers, that you understand them, that you, otherwise it would be a little, again, you can do a lot of these jobs that won't require you to be in the computer or programming or all that all the time. But you do need to have an understanding of ultimately what you're trying to protect and what devices are involved in it. So it is advisable that you have some sort of background in that, in IT at least, to get into cybersecurity. Once you're in here, this field, I would say, is a little kinder to you when you have certifications. They're very big on certifications. It is until recently that more programs, careers, master's programs are available, but not until lately. So they had to certify people pretty much prior to those, and it continues to be a very big deal. Next slide, please. These are just some of the certifications. As you can tell, there's a lot. And I'm just gonna, I don't know if you wanna read those later, but let's go to the next slide to kind of give you a visual of the most popular ones. They call the CISSP the granddaddy of them all, because it's one of those that encompasses every area in cybersecurity. In fact, the 8 domains that we just went through, those are taken from the CISSP certification, the areas that they test you on. So, but if you want to focus on being and maybe more tech or more programming, or hacker, there's an ethical hacker certification. So there's a lot of certifications. The more you can have, the better in this field. So you know, keep that in mind. And I think that that's the end of it. Thank you very much for your attention. I think we're questions at the end, right? So I'll just be quiet now and hand it off to Gabriel, who's fantastic.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Gabriel Reyes, and at the beginning, Monica mentioned that my title is IT Security Analyst. This is actually a new role for me. I'm starting this role with Southwestern College. They recently created that position as they saw that there was a need to have somebody kind of in a specialized cybersecurity role. However, prior to that, for basically the last 15 years, I've been a business advisor with a program called the San Diego and Imperial Small Business Development Center Network, SBDC for short. And so if you're not familiar with the program, it's a program that's funded primarily through the US Small Business Administration. And what we do is we help entrepreneurs and small business owners get their business started, help them grow, and just kind of advise them along in managing their business. So over the last 15 years, I've advised clients through the SBDC in a variety of areas, from business startup to finance, international trade, some digital marketing. But over the last few years, I started to really focus my advising more in the area of cybersecurity, as I saw that there was a really great need for small businesses to be better prepared in this area. And I kind of wanted to do this presentation from that perspective because many of you either know a small business owner, may have worked for a small business owner, or at some point may decide you want to start your own small business. And so I think it was important to kind of give that perspective in terms of how cybersecurity affects small business. I'm not seeing the slides up. I'm not sure if let me see.
Give me a sec.
Okay, no problem. So, actually, well, Monica's perfect. Okay. So, one of the common misconceptions I hear a lot from small business clients is that cyber criminals are really only interested in attacking these large corporations or government agencies. And I can kind of see why they think that way because, when you hear about it in the news, usually it happens at one of these large companies, right? But the fact of the matter is that small businesses are actually ripe targets for cyber criminals. In fact, a couple of different companies and agencies have done some research into this. The Ponemon Institute, which is an independent cybersecurity research organization, conducted a survey of about 1,000 small and mid-sized businesses for their State of the SMB Cybersecurity Report. And what they found is that 76% of those respondents indicated that they had been a victim of some form of cyber attack. Another company, 4IQ, which monitors data breaches online, identity data breaches, also conducted a report. And what they noticed is that cyber criminals have actually shifted more towards small businesses. And as a result, there's been a 424% increase in data breaches between 2017 and 2018. I'm sure most of you can guess maybe why that might be, right? Kind of that little cartoon there illustrates the fact that small businesses tend to be underprepared when it comes to cybersecurity. And so that's why, it's really important to me as being a business advisor for so long, to really kind of make that point come across to these small business owners. Next slide. So, what type of information are these criminals after? There's a lot of different information they could be looking to steal and for different purposes. They might be after some financial information like, bank account numbers, credit and debit card numbers that they can use to either steal money from those accounts or sell to other criminals. They might also be looking for, personal information for the employees or their customers, including their date of birth, their security numbers, address, emails, and so on. that they can use either for identity theft purposes. They can use some of that information to craft phishing emails to try to compromise systems. They may also be after some of the company's proprietary information, right? So this might be specific designs for products and just information on research and development they might be doing. And they might be after that information so they could, sell that to a company that might be making a competing product, right? So they can kind of understand how that product works and try to develop a competing product. They may also use that information to maybe damage the company's reputation, right? And they may also be after the company and their clients' login credentials. So this includes usernames and passwords to their computer systems, to some of the software applications they may use. And as I mentioned, not just the companies, but potentially their particular customers or clients. There's a really good case study that kind of illustrates that last point. About 7 years ago, Target stores were the victim of a huge data breach. Millions of records of customer information were stolen, including credit card information and some other personal information. And the way the attackers were able to get in was not by attacking Target's network directly, but they got in through one of their contractors. So they had a small business that did the refrigeration contracting for Target. They were given access to a specific part of Target's network for billing and project management. And so they were first able to get into that small business since they were underprepared, use the credentials to log into Target's network, and then from there infect their systems and start siphoning off credit card information and other personal information. So, what happened after that is that Target obviously suffered a very significant damage to their reputation. They were faced with a lot of fines and lawsuits from affected parties, right? Next slide. And so that brings us to security and privacy regulations and standards. These days, most businesses and organizations collect some form of private or sensitive information from either their customers, vendors, and others they might be dealing with on a regular basis. So in an effort to protect and retain the privacy of that data, several security and privacy regulations and standards have been put into effect. Some of those might be the result of state, federal, and in some cases even international laws that require that certain measures be taken to protect data. Others may not be required by law, but are mandated by specific industry organizations. So I think Lynn alluded to it in her presentation in terms of credit card processing. There's the payment card industry that has specific standards in place for any company that processes credit card information, right? That information needs to be protected at the time that you're accepting it, the time that you're transmitting it for processing, and if you're obviously storing it as well. So whether or not these regulations and standards are mandated by law or are kind of just best practice for the industry, either way, non-compliance with those can result in some really significant fines. So it's important for business owners to be aware of what security and privacy regulations and standards may apply to their particular business and the way they do business and the type of data they handle. And just to give you an example, because healthcare was mentioned earlier as well, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, is one of those standards that applies to any business or organization that handles that health information, which has these very strict protections. And so if you're found out of compliance with HIPAA, some of those fines can get up to $50,000 per record breached, right? So think about, and there's a maximum in terms of the fines, but think about thousands of records or even millions of records being stolen and having to face some of these large fines. With the payment card industry standards, that could be up to $100,000 per month that you're found to be out of compliance with that. So this is a really huge deal, and it's something that, as I mentioned earlier, all small businesses and even its employees really need to be aware of this, right? Next slide. And cybersecurity can also impact other areas of a business's operations. For example, insurance companies and some lenders are starting to take their cyber risk score into account before making a decision on whether they can offer an insurance policy or a loan to them. The cyber risk score basically kind of provides an assessment of the company's exposure to potential attacks. So what they do is they look at internet-facing information that's available on that company, and from that they kind of put together a score based on their assessment and determine, okay, what's the probability or risk for this company to face a cyber attack. And so the reason why insurance and financing companies are taking a look at that is, if you think about it, going fines, if a business suffers a data breach and they're hit with hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in fines, that could really impact their business, right? In a lot of cases, puts them out of business. So that has to be part of the decision making for some of these insurance companies, and now more and more lenders are also using it. The cyber risk score works very similar to a personal credit score, a FICO score, in that the higher the score you have, the less risk they see in your company in terms of potentially suffering a cyber attack or a data breach. Compliance with security and privacy-related regulations and standards can also affect the way a business does its marketing. A lot of these regulations and standards require that certain information be kept private. So that could potentially affect the way a business does its marketing and the type of information they can include in that marketing. There's a really good example that I read about recently where a dental practice was fined, I think it was like either $15,000 or $20,000 under that HIPAA regulation, because they were responding to a Yelp review and they included information on the patient's procedures that they had done and and some of their personal information, identifying information. So they were hit with a pretty hefty fine for a small dental practice. So that that again can affect kind of their marketing. And so businesses need to be aware of kind of the information that they're not only disclosing in their marketing, but also what type of information they just make available public in general, right? There's certain information you might want to keep off of your website. There's certain information maybe you don't want posted on social media platforms and things like that, because a lot of that information can be used against them. One of the first thing an attacker will do is they'll perform some of this reconnaissance on your company and try to find as much information as possible on its employees, on the nature of the business, so that they can then use that to craft specific attacks and then try to compromise your systems and data. So that's basically what I have in terms of the perspective from small businesses. One of the things that I kind of wanted to mention in terms of the role that I'm stepping into now, I really enjoyed Lynn's presentation and seeing all those different domains, because when this college, Southwestern College, developed this position, they actually took bits and pieces from all those different domains to craft the job description for the role that I'm going to be stepping into. So I'm going to be covering a lot of different areas within that, right? And so it's in terms of my background, I think Lynn mentioned I also have a master's degree in cybersecurity, and I kind of focused my program in terms of the master's degree more on information security policies and information assurance, because my goal from the beginning with that was eventually to get this type of position with an organization like a community college or something similar. And I knew that that's kind of where they would need to have some assistance, because the college already has folks that manage its network, that work on the computers and things like that, but they needed somebody to help it meet some of these compliance requirements and craft policies for that compliance. So I'm very excited to be stepping into that role, and a little sad that I'm leaving the small businesses that I've been advising for 15 years. But again, it's an awesome field to get into. There's a huge demand right now, and there's going to continue to be a huge demand for this type of career and folks that have knowledge and experience in this area, especially if you look at how things are operating right now. As you know, Monica mentioned, everybody kind of working remotely. So yeah, thank you for your time, and I think we're going to open it up for questions now.
Thank you, Lynn and Gabe.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes before we end, and so I wanted to thank you so much for the presentation, wealth of information, and I just wanted to have each one of you, if you could possibly answer this question: what advice would you give yourself at the start of your career? So if you had to look back over your career at the start of your career, what advice would you give yourself? And then the second part of that question is, you know, these scholars are in high school, and so what advice would you give them that are in high school, and in particular our seniors who are getting ready to graduate?
Do you want to go ahead, Gabe, or?
Oh, it's up to you. I mean, from my perspective, you know, my bachelor's degree is actually in economics, right? But that kind of gave me, I think, a really good foundation in critical thinking, which is, I think, very crucial for this type of work as well. You really need to be able to think critically, think, you know, how are these attackers, you know, looking to get into these systems and steal this data? And so that has really helped me, even though it wasn't in an IT field. You know, I was always kind of a tech nerd and stuff, but having that critical thinking skills, those critical thinking skills are, I think, would be extremely important in this field.
Yes, I will have to agree with you. Again, because we have similar backgrounds. My bachelor's is in business, and my background has been in international business as well. And I don't think I would have changed much because you know and like Gabe, I didn't really have a set IT background, but like him, I like to tinker with the computers and all that. So that was kind of our natural thing going on here that pushed us into this field. But I think, you know, anything you can learn, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's put in front of you, learn it, even if it's like the strangest thing, because you will be impressed how that will come into use at some point in your career, whether it's cybersecurity, business, or whatever you decide to do. Learn everything you can. Don't ever pass up the opportunity.
Absolutely. And then in terms of seniors, you know, some advice in terms of those seniors that are going to be graduating and either going into the workforce or, you know, going off to college. They are, and if you're interested in cybersecurity, there are a couple of cybersecurity related apprenticeship programs now. And so that's a really great way to kind of start learning the field. A lot of those programs will help you obtain some of these certifications that Lynn mentioned. And then you're working that time and you're earning money during that apprenticeship. So that's kind of a really great way to get your foot in the door.
Yes, and I don't have any benefit from this, but there are programs, for example, like the University of San Diego has a summer boot camp for high school seniors in cybersecurity. So, and there's a lot of programs like that you can take, and they will start guiding you into that path and you know, put you in the right places, introduce you to the right people or companies or whatnot. So you might want to look at that as well, you know, to just make sure that you're going into the path you like or you want.
Yeah, and I wanted to add three things. Melissa, if you could share with them the presentations. And on my presentation, if students are interested in ICT/cyber or any other careers, we have a college program finder on our careered.org, where if you're interested in whatever program, it'll tell you what community colleges you can find it. And then another thing I wanted to say is,
the body buttons are located on the side. So now when Diana leaves the house, she can either click on the video clip
I don't know
onto
who
the
that
shirt.
is. Okay, so another thing I wanted to say, and I don't think you guys talked about it, but I think if anyone's interested in the military, correct me if I'm wrong, Lynn, sorry to put you on the spot. It really helps if you join the military and then you go into cyber because you have security clearance, right?
Yes, totally forgot about that. That is actually one of the best things you could do for yourself in cybersecurity, that security clearance, especially if you want to stay here in San Diego, I would dare to say that 70% of the jobs out here offered, because there's a lot of defense contractors, will, right, Gabe, will ask for a security clearance. And it's not something you can just go get out there and, go to Vaughn's and buy it or, do a course or something. It's something that you can get while you are in the military, Navy or whatnot. You get a security clearance, and then it stays with you after you leave for a certain amount of period, but you can continue to keep it active if one of these jobs. So yes, that would be very helpful as well if you want to. And there's a lot of opportunities within the Navy, or the military, in cybersecurity that will prepare you.
Right, and then one last thing that I wanted to say in my slides, the San Diego Cyber Center of Excellence, they also have, like Gabe mentioned, like an education tab where they're offering like internships and whatnot in San Diego with their members, which are all San Diego companies.
Yes.
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys so much for your time, your expertise, and sharing your information. We do appreciate it. Scholars, please return back to your class now so that you can sign out and then make it to your next class. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Melissa.
you.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, guys.
Bye. Bye, Gabe. Bye.
Bye. Good seeing you guys.
Gracias,
Likewise.
chicos. Los quiero.
Igualmente.
Oye, si me mandan el recording, se los mando.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Super.
Bye.
Gracias. Bye.
Buen fin.
Igual.
Igualmente.
Gracias.
Bye.
Bye.